If everyone would please stand, I'm going to call the Town Council meeting for March 29, 2018 to order. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Moores is going to be attending, but she's going to be a few minutes late, so please excuse her coming in late. She's at another meeting and needs to be there. We have one public comment, Mr. Savazio.
The other day I stopped over Gordon's house and informed him that I was going to bring you guys a list of all the illegal activities and signs and everything else on Route 6. And he very vehemently told me not to do it because I was going to be attacking local businesses. You don't have any local businesses. You have a bunch of wooden shacks, a bunch of empty trailers.
Yes, I'm listening.
No, I'm waiting.
Okay.
Businesses do something for their community they're in. They pay taxes so that you can provide services and maybe tax relief. I don't know if you noticed, Gordon started a new business. He put a piece of plywood on a telephone pole, wrote some letters on it, drove another trailer in to make Route 6 look even better. All right? That's not a business. That's a lemonade stand. We need new ordinances that don't allow trailers to operate in businesses. We need to enforce our sign ordinances. Am I'm confusing you, Gordon?
No, Mr. Savazio, thank you.
Chelsea Trading Post has had a truck park for 15 years that is no longer a truck, it's a sign, all right? And you need a sign to upgrade your sign ordinances. You need to get your planning board to work, and you need to not have people on the council who protect their friends. We have people bringing in refuge from all over the state to burn on Route 6. We have stuff being dumped. We have obviously things being put on Route 6 that are there for signs, and Route 6 continues to look bad. So Carl Sicoscio was here last week when you were talking about the car place, and he said, well, Route 6 looks like a dump. Well, it's your dump.
Thank you.
I didn't know I was dumb, but that'll do it. Thank you. So everybody thank Mr. Rogers for the new business he started.
Thank you. Moving on to the public hearing. I just want to read a couple of things before we begin. We will be presenting our budget. There are copies here. If anybody did not get a copy and you would like one, it's here. Would you just take a few in case somebody...
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Ken. Any person who wishes to speak will stand and please give your name and address. All questions and statements must be addressed to the Town Council President. There will be no crosstalk between the audience. There will be a 3-minute time limit. You are cautioned to avoid repeating or irrelevant comments. Personal attacks will not be allowed. Once all have been heard, the council will close the public hearing. Does anybody need any further direction? Thank you. Does everyone have a copy that wants a copy? Let's begin. I think just for organization point, we'll start with general government, which is the first page. On that, we made some changes from the original. I must start with, give me 1 second. Before we began our budget, when we were presented with the original budget, when we started with the workshops, we were well over the 4% cap. We have now narrowed it down to 3.87, I believe.
The increase in the expenditures is 3.47, I think.
thought last
We're
night.
just under the 4%
I
cap.
thought it was
Just
3.87 last
That's
night.
where the cap is, but
Okay.
so it's not really 100% linked with your expenditures. Your expenditure increase is 3.47.
So we worked very hard on this. Some very difficult decisions were made, but tonight is our public hearing to hear your concerns. We do not adopt the budget until April 12th. So going from there, Kelly, you have the changes that we made?
I do, but it's not, I have to go back to that budget.
All right, fine.
Basically, we are where we are now.
Okay.
Can I just ask one question?
Yes.
Obviously, it's a different format, because I'm assuming somewhere we have utilities. Have they been moved?
We go right ahead. Kelly can
Okay.
explain that.
We have a new accounting system that we implemented January 1st, so it's mid-year. So we have a few problems with that. What we did was we entirely restructured our chart of accounts because the state has this new transparency portal, and you have to report in the fashion that they want. Our system before, our chart was so, it was not active to that change. So what we did was, because we were changing our system, we decided to change our chart of accounts so that it better conformed to that. So basically, we have a lot of crosswalks between the old account and the new account. One of the bigger changes, which we can't get, it's going to be a little bit, this is going to be a difficult year to get through, but once we're through it, what you're going to see is utilities, electric, heating, fuel has to be split by department and function. So that's why those lines exist in each department, but they're zero, because last year we didn't budget that way. And this year that we're actually in, we didn't budget that way. So when we report for this year, it's not that way, but next year when we report, the budget we're going to prepare will have to be split. But right now, for comparability, it is still in Department 16. If you can go to Department 16, you'll see that it's still there. But that amount, those amounts will be split before this budget is adopted. So what I have to do, the problem is, in order to show apples to apples, you can't just split the current year. You almost have to recalculate what the prior year's split would be.
So Department 16 is on page 7. So if you look at page 7, it's titled "Must be redistributed to other departments."
Right.
Because the state has said we aren't transparent enough by having all those bills on one page and not in each department.
So for the purpose of this disclosure, I will split this year's, and for comparability, I will split the year we're in, and I will budget appropriately for next year, but I won't go back in the previous years. And also, it's only for budget disclosure because we adopted it the other way, and we're a bottom line budget by department. So Department 16 did exist, so we can't completely reallocate it. Department 16 was an actual department that was approved at the financial town meeting with the bottom line. So I'm working out how we're really going to disclose it. The important part here is that the accounts are set up and that they're still in total for us to discuss, and then we will split it. Okay.
And as we go along, you'll see that there are various columns. The budget from fiscal year 2018 was last year, which ends in July. Our new fiscal year 2019 begins in July, and you can see the comparison. So the last column is a increase or decrease. If there was a decrease in a line item, it's in parentheses. If it's an increase, it's not in parentheses. So you can see some of the increases and decreases there.
And also to point out too, this is a little bit messier too, because we're combining certain departments. For example, it's not a charter, it's not stated in the charter that planning and zoning have to be different departments, just that you have a planner and a zoner and they have different authorities. But from a state transparency, planning and zoning are they're one department. So you'll see that we've combined them, and I've done as much as I could to be transparent while still trying to conform to the new guidelines. It's kind of complicated, but.
So you
there's,
see, yeah.
yeah.
Land trust used to be a separate page, but now they're included.
Exactly.
And conservation
Same.
was a separate item, but today, now, it's continued under general government.
The building and zoning and planning is one department, but I kept them somewhat separate as much as I could. The assessor is in finance, which is where from a supervisory role, that is the role anyway, so we've combined those two departments.
Social services.
Social
Has
services
the
is
other-
now with the charitable organizations that we fund, they're together. Public Works and our landfill and our refuse removal, they're one, which it should have been anyway. The, let me see, the biggest thing too is public safety for the police. Dispatchers really they have to be split from our police because our dispatchers dispatch for fire and police, therefore they're considered their own department. But for transparency, I still show them with public safety, but if you notice, they have different numbers, account numbers, so that I can segregate it for the state when I have to report, because they are considered separate. What else? So there's been a lot of changes like that. If you have any
And you'll
questions,
notice them as we go through at the top of the header. Okay. So looking at page 1, the general government, again, you can see the increase in the last column. The very last column is blacked out because that's the financial town meeting where it's approved. Any questions?
The changes in that, town clerk originally asked for computers for the council and a program, and what else was there? Right, additional money for the elections, and the computers and the program, we've decided we're gonna fund from a different special revenue fund that the state mandates is kept separate. So instead of funding it from taxpayer dollars, we're gonna fund it from a different special revenue fund.
So that's not going to be anywhere.
So it's not in here now.
Any questions on general government?
No, the other thing that you did was increase the clerk, like hours for the clerk because of the.
Right.
Excuse me, was there a percentage that the non-union employees received
We
increase?
agreed on a 1.5%.
Two.
2, I'm sorry, that's right, 2, excuse me.
2%.
Last night.
Last
That's
night.
not reflected in here because we did it last night at 9:30,
Okay, right.
So there will be changes before the adoption. This, but for the purpose of the public hearing, it was 2.
It's 2%, excuse me, thank you for that. Moving on to page 3, which is finance, which as Kelly mentioned now includes the assessor. I didn't know if anybody had any questions. Does anybody have any questions on that department?
Takes a minute.
Okay, yeah, I figured you needed
So,
a minute, so I'll be
guys,
quiet.
through it, and I'll talk a little bit. So some of the basic assumptions were that we included a 10% increase for health and a 0% increase for dental. I did confirm and discuss with our provider today that it is looking like that. They want to do 12 and 1.5. We're basically going to negotiate that down to 10 and 0. We're self-funded. I feel we have a decent enough fund balance that I don't want to increase it any higher than that. We'll take the risk. The other projections, we use the bargaining unit contracts for any other increases. The state retirement for the police went up. The state retirement, I think, for municipalities went down, or it's within a 1%. So the police rate for the retirement system is now,
Isn't that in the police budget?
it is, but you don't know the rate. The rate's not in there. So the police is, the pension for the police is 30.34%, and for the town, it's 10.23 plus 1%. That's another thing you'll see separate here. We've always had, since the Pension Reform Act, what was that, 4 or 5 years ago? We've had 2 pension systems. One is called the TIA CRAF, and one is the state retirement. We've always considered them one. The state now requires that you split them, so you'll see that here. It's called TIA CRAF. the tax. MERS, right. The town puts in 1% into that plan and the employee 5%. And in the other plan, it's actuarially determined what the town's rate is every year, and the employee puts in anywhere between 6 and 10, depending on whether it's a police officer or a municipal employee, 5 and 10. So the employer share for that plan is 10.23% and 30.34% if you're an officer. So you will see in the officer's salaries and benefits that their retirement went up because they went up quite a bit. What else? There are basic assumptions.
Well, we're on 11, so is there any questions on 11? Department 11? Okay. Moving on to social services, which is Department 12, which now also includes the Department 17, 18, and those are all the ones that we make donations to, which are listed down at the bottom there. Cass, Sojourn House, Northern Rhode Island Conservation, Wildlife. And I will point out, in case I'm noticing travel, it says 0. We do have a vehicle that she uses. She doesn't use her own personal vehicle. Any other questions on social services? Moving on to planning, which now includes the planning, building, and zoning. Any questions on that if you need time? Yep.
The zoning officials enforcer, where would that be?
He's a zoning official.
It's under the zoning.
It's under the director.
Oh, all right.
Because we didn't add extra funding for him, basically, we have a building official who works less than the 24 hours that he's budgeted. So there are hours in his budget, that's why they got the assistance. If he was able to work the 24 hours, they most likely wouldn't have filled that position, as they split it. So this is budgeted at the full 24 hours. The zoning official will not, what do you want to call him?
Building
The
official.
building official and the person that they hired to assist him, he's not eligible for retirement or anything like that. So
He's
this is
contractual.
built in, there's a savings built in, but basically this position is structured around 24 hours. If the employee changes, everything would change, and we've not budgeted for that reason.
I noticed there's no actual, I mean, there's an actual for 2016 and 15.
There'll be an actual for 17 next week before we adopt.
Okay, because I'm just wondering,
Again, because the departments had to be teased
Right.
out, if you will, it's a little more difficult, and Kelly's been doing the audit, et cetera, so
I have to
there's
remember.
been a lot on her plate these past few weeks. So that will be done before we adopt next, on the 12th.
And that doesn't.
And what I'll do is
show
15 will
the
drop
increase,
off. 15 will drop off, I'll add
though. It doesn't
17.
show the increase either,
No.
because we weren't sure if you wanted an increase.
All right, I didn't hear you.
I said, that doesn't reflect an increase. That's
The actual,
the actual, does that show an increase?
it shows what we actually spent so far in the,
So, the 17's not in there.
Right, I don't understand, that has nothing to do with the budget that we're adopting. So I don't know what you're asking.
Does that pay that's for 2019 reflect an increase?
For who?
for the, no, For the planner?
No.
No,
For the,
Just the 2%, 3% that they asked for non.
no, we said last night that we have to completely, now that you've figured out what you're gonna do with salaries, we're gonna go with
Okay,
the
so,
structure.
all right, that's what I.
That
that's
won't,
what
that
I-
won't
my
change
question.
this overall budget by more than $12,000 either way.
Right.
Anyway, more like 6 or 5. But
Okay.
it affects probably 40 lines, so, with the help, with the
FICA.
retirement and the FICA and the splits with everybody.
but
so.
the gentleman that we have working
Will
with,
not.
he doesn't get any of
No,
that, so, okay.
So
He
Lynn,
doesn't
does that
get it.
answer your question?
Yeah, well, I'll be curious to see how much Rhett actually got as opposed to,
well, that won't show in here anyway.
it won't show for 2017 actual?
What he got will show, right, but the
Right.
split between what he's doing.
Right, I understand that.
Yes, it will show. I would say about half, based on what he works every week.
Any other questions on Department 14? On Department 15, the libraries.
They asked for 7 that one.
They asked for 7,000 and we decreased it. Well, actually, they decreased it themselves
To
to
five.
5, and then we decreased it again to 4. Any questions on the library? Moving on, here's that Department 16, must be redistributed.
I think we just should do
It's not gonna be pretty.
that. We will pay something.
I honestly really don't know. I think we have to keep it at the end for comparability for all the previous years. 18 and 19 will somehow be split to the other departments. Just for show, because how else would you do it? I really don't know. I'm working it out, that's why it's not done.
Okay, on basically,
So-
just percentages of.
It needs to be disclosed so that you can see like it's comparable to the previous years, but it can't be in the calculation on the bottom line. And you can't have anything miscellaneous, it has to be distributed to where the expense. So even if you say, okay, the Eddy building, we're gonna give it to Bob's budget for DPW, we're gonna assign him the heat for the Eddy building and all that.
And the electric.
And the electric.
So every time we pay a bill, we're gonna have to figure out where that bill, the electric bill, exactly which account it should go to, or create some sort of an analysis saying that's, give him 75% of all the heat and electricity, me 3% or 2%, you know, okay. We'll figure out a way, and once we do it, we'll be consistent.
Any questions on Department 16?
What was the rationale for dropping the purchase services contracts? Did one run out or it just isn't costing that much?
Paychecks, we have a whole new account system, we brought payroll inside, and we're doing it on our own. We were paying a significant amount. So even though we might have to pay a consultant this year to kind of really work through the whole system and go through all the quarterlies and the 1099, like the W-4s and the W-2s and all the payroll. And next year, we're hoping it goes down even more. That it was the cost even.
Yeah. Did there used to be, and I'm trying to remember, a council contingency?
There is.
There is. This just says contingency, so I don't know. Is that still?
Well, it's contingency, but in the state's chart of accounts, it's called council contingency because I just renamed it. It's the same. We'll use it in the same way.
Same.
And it will be reflected in Department 10, which is general government, because the council is in general government.
Okay, so, okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Any other questions on must be redistributed? Because it's really not the top.
It's not anymore. Well, it is. For 6 months. For 6 months.
You got it, you got it.
It's a 6 months
Yes.
facility.
Yeah, we got it.
One other question.
Yep.
I noticed, well, cemetery fund was negated.
Yes. We,
Should that come back, where will it go?
That will actually go to, there's a section for transfers to other funds. It will go with that. Are you saying where
What
would it
page,
be
she wants to
distributed?
know what department it would be. If it's moved to reinstate that, what department would that go under?
I'm not sure, I'll have to
Okay.
look at it.
I'm just thinking of the upcoming financial town meeting. I mean, I don't know if these are still legitimate, line items or departments. So that if you want to add a new line item, you have to send in a formal letter.
Yes.
But, so would you have to do that if you wanted
I see
to
what you're
resurrect
asking.
Once
this?
the budget's adopted, you can get a copy of it, and then you'll see it where it is.
Okay.
So, all right, so
The
it will
history of
still
it
be
won't
there.
go away.
Will it be listed as cemetery trust fund? I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Where
Yes, it
do
might
I
be
look for that?
referred to as transfer to cemetery trust, but it would be very similar.
Okay.
The word cemetery trust will be
Would have
in.
been
You
at
should
the,
always call me, and I would tell you what it was.
Yes, could you state your name and address?
Brenda Moffett, Clonsville Road.
Thank you.
Concerning the cemetery trust fund, now, does that mean, seeing there's no monies put there for that there'll be no upkeep of the cemeteries?
Well, the ones that were part of that trust where the monies came from, it states that we have to use only the interest to pay for the mowing of that. There's no interest left in that. We only have principal, which we can't touch. The law states that we can only have, so a few years back, it was instituted that we would have a line item. It was felt that at that time that the taxpayers should pay for those cemeteries. And it's not every cemetery, it's just plots
Right.
at the cemeteries that would be maintained. And we had hired someone to do that mowing. We have decided that we did not feel it was fair because not all plots are being mowed, just certain ones. And the way the law is stated is that we can only use the interest. So we took that money that was used for the cemetery fund and added it to the contingency fund.
I'd like to add on to that. In the
Okay.
previous years, a previous council, because the money, in perpetuity, it was impossible to fund with the interest as somebody paid maybe $25 100 years ago to only use the interest to mow a cemetery. As the cost increased, there was not enough interest to mow it 4 times a year. And then it should have went to 3, should have went to 2, should have went to 1. But several councils ago, they decided to stop taxing the taxpayer for something that it was never designed to be taxpayer funded to mow. We have enough hard times paying for the things, the roads, and the maintenance of the buildings, and to add an additional cost for something, you know, and it opened up Pandora's box. Once you stop paying, taxpayers start adding to the till, they should have a right to have their parents' cemetery mowed. That's the Pandora's box. The only people that had their plots mowed was the people that donated the money to specifically use the interest to mow that lot. Once a taxpayer is forced to pay for taxes to do that plot, he's also should be entitled to have his family's lot done, because now he's contributing forcefully.
But these people that had paid, even though it was
Right.
years
Our
back,
obligation was to use the interest only, which we do. And if there's interest in there that ever comes up, it'll be specifically used.
I will tell you, when this first came about, when we first found out that we were not doing it the correct way, that we were not just utilizing the interest, I called,
not to interrupt, but who, when people paid for perpetual care
yep,
years back or whatever, and that was supposed to be whatever, was it set up then?
that
They
interest
knew
only.
Interest only.
Right,
Interest
interest
only.
only, yes. Yes, it's always been interest only. And when the concern came up that we were exceeding the interest only, we were stopping it. I called around to various towns and cities. Nobody knew what I was talking about. When I asked them, how do you do your perpetual care? Nobody knew what I was talking about. We don't do that. We don't do that. So, and a couple of them said, oh yeah, we do have that fund, but they weren't utilizing it.
Not only that, they were cherry picking which ones they were mowing, which ones they were choosing not to mow. So if you're gonna do them all, you're supposed to do them all because everybody paid. But what was happening, only certain cemeteries were being mowed, and over half the list was being ignored.
So if it's interest only that mows them,
Yeah.
and there's money still there but
Yeah.
not collecting interest,
Right.
that's what's moved to another fund?
No, we can't touch that money right now.
What happens to it? It has-
It stays and earns
It
interest,
stays.
and
It's stay
the
there.
interest can be used to mow whenever that money's available.
So,
It's
it,
just right now.
It's-
Again, when you give $25 and have a cemetery mowed for perpetuity for 200 years, it's unsustainable. And that's why it was interest only.
right, and we were going to check into that about what we can do in the meantime with that money, because there is a significant amount of money sitting there, but as you know, it doesn't collect much interest. I mean, look at your own account.
So there's no kind of funding that, it could, some other kind of fund it could be put into to earn better interest, or,
I'm not sure that we can move it.
Well, governmental funds are limited, especially funds that are need to be readily used, in the investment
but
portfolio.
if there's no interest, you can't.
I don't know
use
what
it.
you're earning on your accounts right now, but I mean, you're not gonna put it in a money market where it's earning and it's volatile. You just wouldn't. So the stable markets are really low interest right now. And they happen for
Oh, yeah.
years and years and years. So maybe at the time they did it, they were earning interest at a higher level, but before I even started here, they had already dipped into the principal value and nobody even realized that
Many
they were
years
still
ago.
using it.
It is already done.
Now you have $18,000. How much interest do you earn on $18,000 in a money market? Not much, unless you really roll the dice and hope for, and what is that gonna buy you? Maybe 1 year's mowing in two or three? So what I've now suggested is that maybe our solicitor look into what we can do with at least the 18,000. Instead of it sitting there for forever, perpetuity, that maybe we could at least use it while it exists and take care of it. And then close the fund. I don't know what your what our
We
legal
have to
options
look
are.
at, look at the original documents.
I really have no idea. I wouldn't even know whether you would
Because
find
you're gonna
it.
run into the same problem down the road, once you use
Right.
18,000, then you're gonna have the same
Right,
arguments
right.
here.
It's right,
Who's ever
but
sitting here then,
Right.
you're gonna say, well, why'd you use the money?
John Lewis told me he searched, he could not find any records.
Nothing, huh?
so I don't know where you're gonna.
Excuse me.
And it was never intended to be taxpayers'
Records
fault.
for-
The cemetery,
We know who
original
should be.
the original document.
But there's
The
no way.
original, which
Excuse me,
documents?
Mrs. Ryder.
The ones people signed to have
Well, no, I'm presuming that something had to be set up with the town, whenever it was 100 years ago.
Legislatively, it was
Yeah.
done.
So that would have to be found and determined what that is.
Mrs. Ryder, you had your hand up.
Yes, I did. When people signed up and gave their money for care for in perpetuity, there is nothing on those documents that say, as long as the interest exists.
State legislature.
So, I mean, these people entered into a contract, it might have been 100 years ago. It might have been 15 years ago, okay? But they still entered into it in good faith. And
so
I
did the
know,
town.
huh?
So did the town.
Right, but this is probably what, 3 cents on your tax bill?
Not if you do all of them on the list.
And, excuse me, if this $2,100 is probably 3 cents on your tax bill, to mow twice a year.
But again, they're not all being done. Not
No,
all.
because not everyone paid.
No, we have a list of all the ones that have paid, and
Then all getting gone.
they're
We
not
weren't
all.
even doing half of them,
And, well, then maybe they should all be done.
and it won't be 3 cents.
Mr. Savazio.
Yeah, a couple of comments. One, we're all proud of historic and rural Foster. This is a financial matter. On the other hand, it's part of our town. Maybe the council should every year go to the taxpayers at the town financial meeting and ask them specifically if they want to fund this, or it should be handed to the Historical Society as a money-making event, or they should come in and ask to fund this. And I agree with Gordon, the taxpayers shouldn't be taxed by you, but for, long-term care of other people's property. But these cemeteries years ago were all overgrown, and Rhode Island had a big cleanup of those cemeteries. Can you imagine the Moosup Valley Cemetery going back into brush or any of the other ones in town? So I think you have a responsibility. One is financial, which Gordon is dealing with, but on the other hand, you have a responsibility to the history of this community, and I think there should be a line item there to ask the citizens if they want to fund it. And just like any other special thing, a quasi-public library, for years, they didn't tell us how much money they had separately, but somehow you need to fix this. You just can't leave it the way it is, because in 20 years, these things will be a mess.
Thank you. Any other concerns about Department 16 to be redistributed? Yes?
So the monies that are there,
Mhm.
there's no procedure or
Not that we're
something
aware
that
of.
the attorney can find out that could move that money to a point, to a
We're gonna
place
find
where.
out.
That's not that we are aware of at this point, but we are going to ask for it to be investigated.
I mean, you could do a couple things. You could have your state legislators tours out here, put a bill in to use that $18,000, and when it's gone, it's gone.
But it will only last 8 years.
Right.
That doesn't fix the problem.
It doesn't.
You have a
Right.
problem, you need to fix it.
Right.
You're in charge.
Right.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, moving on to Department 20, Public Works. You have, and I'll give you a few minutes for that. And in case anybody doesn't know, our new Public Works Department head is here, Mr. Law.
Take a bow.
Yes,
Great job.
we are all very happy.
Under fire, he did.
And they cut your budget $5,000.
And we cut his budget 5,000. He was here last night, he left, and we cut it.
So they did that at 9:30 as well, so you'll see a negative 5,000 that hasn't been redistributed.
So, typical. Yes, Mr. Savazio.
Yeah, on the planning board, I had suggested, there's no way I can do this singularly, that the money that was being built up for fire truck be separated, and you lease a fire truck, and that you buy a highway truck, which is $200,000 you presently have. This allows you in 1 year to get 2 pieces of equipment that are badly needed. And I'll also state this, it'll cost you an extra $40,000 or $50,000 in the end to buy these 2 pieces of equipment, but you desperately need them, and it's a one-time fix. Unless you people come up with some way to increase revenues as costs go up from the schools, and this is not a slam at the schools, basically, you're gonna put this town out of business unless you increase revenues. So, I'm wondering if you had decided in your meetings to do what I suggested.
We have not decided to go
Well,
that direction.
take your time.
I'll wait till tomorrow, we can read the Gazette.
Thank you.
Why?
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
The line item 3-320, purchase services professionals,
Yep.
that went up 10,000, what is that?
That's for doing the trees, cutting of the trees that are considered dangerous. And we thought that maybe they would have fallen down in these storms, but guess what? Those didn't. Others did. So we have those to clean up, and still the ones that are considered dangerous at this time.
Okay, and the one under it, purchase services, service contract that was nothing, is that from somewhere else? Or what is it, is $5,100 now?
It's, I can't remember that either. Do you have it? Okay.
It's in the narrative.
I was gonna go get the narrative.
Is that the sweeper?
3-320.
It could be the sweeper.
Is that the
The
sweeper?
sweeper. We are now required to sweep the roads. because it goes into
There's a state mandate by DEM.
Yeah, DEM, so it goes into the side, so we have to rent a sweeper to sweep.
That's not actually the speaker.
That's not actually sweeper, and that's not the sweeper.
Well, this is
Okay.
water
Do we have
quality
sweepers?
testing, it's been moved from other places, that's what it is, but that's a new account that we have, so we've taken things out that were budgeted in other places. It's water, are you talking about the service contracts? It's
Yes.
water quality testing that we're required to get, it's generator testing, it's alarm testing, and our alarm system for the town buildings.
Okay. So what happened to the sweeper?
It is in here,
Okay. Didn't we have a sweeper or did it die?
it's gone.
Was it
That's
sold?
long road.
It was sold for whatever we could get for it.
It was supposed to be more maintained.
Any other questions on public works?
So the bigger changes in here was $10,000 for the trees, $5,000 for the rental of a sweeper, and $2,500 for rental for a piece of equipment. Also, please note from the audience, we're not recycling as we should.
Right.
So our tipping fees are gonna go up,
And those we can't really change.
and the rate per ton over the cap has increased by $7.50 per ton. And that's a lot.
The council has floated, there are some options out there, but it's a PR issue. We can probably see, what they say, estimate 30 to 50,000
That's-
on the pay-as-you-go. It's basically you purchase a bag, and it kind of makes you recycle more, because as you buy the bag, you're gonna stop thinking, well, I'm buying bags now, so that's gonna get recycled, so I'm gonna recycle it, and I'm gonna put the real garbage in the bag. Also, it's kind of the other upside of it too, is an elderly woman may only, elderly couple may only use very minimal garbage in a week, versus a family of 4. They'll have to buy more bags because they have multiple kids, where the elderly couple are using less and they're paying less. To some extent, they're subsidizing the larger family. So that would kind of even that out, but the key point in the savings is you're more self-conscious when you're buying the bags to what you're gonna throw in it. Because if the bag's full, you have to buy another one. So it's a proven fact, and they estimated it would save this town 30 to 50,000 on our tipping fees. Because what happens is, the landfill continually increases our percentage of recycling, and there's penalties when you don't reach it, and you pay a higher tipping fee when you go over the amount of tipping fees, and they're increasing the tipping fees. So that's something that we need to have a discussion on, we need to have a public hearing on, but that is gonna take the entire community to take that and understand that that is a true savings, and it's a paradigm of changing our ways of how we usually do it. Most people think, hey, I get garbage picked up, it's the only thing I really get, it's great, and we need it, but it's starting to affect the tax dollars by thousands, tens of thousands of dollars in our budget. So it's a discussion that needs to be had, and a civil discussion on it. So I just
And
wanted to
those-
add that.
Those can be found on page 9, and you'll see that those are significant increases. Audrey?
I have a question. Are we still borrowing and swapping equipment with, I think Gloucester we were doing that with, and are we still doing that, or?
No,
Well, some things we have the ability to do
we have the ability, but we haven't.
when needed.
Yes, Mr. Savazio?
Yeah, years ago, when Brad Dorn was the solicitor, I asked him to contact recycling, whatever the name is, resource recovery, to get some kind of waiver. Most of the cities and towns are recycling their leaves, all right? We don't put any leaves out.
We have looked into that in the
Okay.
past.
And also, we probably burn, since we have so many wood stoves, we probably burn a lot of our recyclable paper. So you have looked into that? You've
We
been
have
turned down?
investigated it. Actually, Mr. Cardillo looked into it, and it wasn't something that they were interested
The
in.
only thing we were allowed to do is use our overage on leaves to, like, let Cranston use it to
Right.
offset their costs.
So are we doing that? I remember that.
We are.
Yes, we are doing that.
Okay, thank you.
It's no financial benefit to us, it financially benefits the city of Cranston or Johnston, who uses our unused leaves tonnage, so we don't benefit from it.
They
Why
don't
don't we
use any
just
money.
bag
No.
every leaf in the woods and set it out? We can go there.
I think our 5 or 6 guys are gonna do that.
Did you have anything else, Mrs. Wright?
No, I just think that,
Any
you
other?
know, No, I just.
And we do need to look at what we're recycling.
So I have a question, a follow-up question. We give them a benefit and get nothing in exchange.
Correct.
Right.
So that's,
We were being nice neighbors.
probably
See how
not
it
that
works out.
smart.
In the future, we might get reciprocity, so.
Right. They might be nice to
Well,
us,
that's what you should be working
Find out.
so. Department 20, anything else? No? Okay. Moving on to Department 30, Police and Dispatch. We did make significant cuts there, as you see.
It's really not in the body of the budget, it was done again last night, so it's in red at the bottom. Well, you don't see it in red, right?
No.
92,000 at the bottom. It was basically to level fund.
So what's that make the FY19 bottom line number?
1512, so it's an increase of 400, just because we leveled, it was 92,000.
This is right.
And how is this impacting the police and dispatch?
That would be up to the chief as to how it is, because it is a bottom line and they can, but it's basically going to a nine-man department.
In this, I'm sorry.
It would eliminate hiring.
No, in this, the world is not getting safer. Our cities are not getting safer. The opioid epidemic or problem or whatever isn't going away, it's getting worse. It just seems counterproductive to lessen or cut back on our police. I mean, one of the things that the council is responsible for is the health and safety of the community. And going back to 9 officers, I mean, just, I read, there was a machete-wielding individual on East Killingley Road. There was somebody else who broke in on Howard Hill Road. Accidents all over. The police presence at the schools, which probably will be required more now, or something like that. We can't afford to go backwards on our police protection.
We cannot.
I agree. Thank you.
So,
Mr. Donovan.
Kelly, for this department's budget, how many FTEs does this equate to?
10 officers. He hasn't distributed the 92,000.
Okay.
So the budget with the 92,000 included is, it's 10 officers, 4 dispatchers full-time,
Okay.
2 part-time, well, really 3, but they share part-time duties, so it's just,
So
2 of them.
15 full-time equivalents?
I would say yes.
Okay. I came here a couple of weeks ago to talk about specifically this department's budget. I look at numbers over the long term, and this department is growing financially in absolute disproportion with everything else in this town. For every 1% our town budget increases in value, the police department budget is increasing by 5 and 6%. And this isn't a blip, it's been going on for 12 years. Since 2007, this department's budget's increased by 71%. And at some point in time, I mean, I do appreciate the work the police do, but we need to put a stake in the ground and rein in these costs. For a town our size, 15 full-time equivalents seems pretty significant to me. I don't know what we had in 2007, but I'm pretty darn sure it wasn't 15.
At what cost?
With 7 officers.
The police now work in pairs, there's 2 and 2, so that they are
Not all
never
the time.
alone. Not all the time, but you try to do that as much as possible. Would you explain that, please, Chief?
Yes. Again, I've been in law enforcement 33 years. In 1985, when I started in law enforcement, we were trained to respond to domestics with 2 officers, alarms with 2 officers. There's many times where we don't have 2 officers. At night, we do have the 3 to 11 shift and 2 or 11 to 7 shift. We do have 2 officers assigned. Sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes it's, it's adequate, it's safe, it provides a response force to multiple incidents at the same time, or to prioritize those incidents to, instead of relying on mutual aid, sometimes that mutual aid response isn't there. Somebody mentioned the machete yielding thing. That incident required mutual aid response from multiple agencies just because of safety factors. When I presented this budget, presented a realistic and efficient budget, presenting the $92,000 increase. And again, if you look through the list, many of the line items represent what the town council awarded the union last year. You see a lot of the zeros. The only portion that I did go up was to promote sergeants, because some of our officers don't have supervisors assigned to them or not doing evaluations. We referenced the budget from 12 years ago. We were underfunded then. We were losing officers then. In 2011, you mentioned 2011. I retired in 2011. Our patrol officers are making what I retired at 16 years on the job serving this community. So our officers today are making that what they do. Your salary probably went up in the last 23 years, correct?
Yes.
Are you ever consider rolling your salary back?
I'm not here to discuss
I'd ask
my...
that you discuss
I'm
it.
sorry.
It's not-
I don't want to get into a one-on-one here, when I'm just talking, my concern...
When I got into public safety, again, we discussed it last night, and again, I'm not going to be discussing it in 13 days, but it's, again, I hold public safety very high. I hold officer safety very high. Again, present a realistic budget. Again, the leaders of this town, if you want to present, and you moved this budget forward to level fund it last night 4-1. There was discussion to, again, and it will move towards the financial town meeting. We have worked with 4 officers. It's very unsafe. It increases liability for the town. It increases the potential for injury for the officers. It increases the injury and hazard to the citizens. We have worked, again, I worked most of my career at 7 officers. Many nights, for 11 years, I was a night shift officer, 7 at night to 7 in the morning. After 2 o'clock in the morning, during those years, I was by myself. And again, a high risk to public safety, a high risk to myself, handling calls, or not being proactive, being reactive. We went through a time span where, when Chief Coyne put those officers on at night, our DUIs went up, our roads became safer. Gordon, being on EMT, Suicide 6, our accidents have went down. We don't have a lot of serious accidents anymore. Yeah, again, an occasional accident, but again, our roads are safer. Our communities aren't broken, our businesses aren't broken into. Surrounding communities, our businesses are broken into. Our officers solve B&Es, just recently with a partial thumbprint. Again, there's a lot of reasons. You can turn on the news. Just the other day, we had an incident at the school. Again, the regional school. Again, that could have very been a day when there might have been only 1 officer in town. That day, we did have 3 officers in town, myself and the 2 scheduled officers. Again, I presented a realistic budget. Again, at the financial town meeting, the community will have a chance to, vote it up or down or level fund it as you guys presented it last night.
If I could finish my comments, please.
Yes.
I do appreciate the work the police department does. I do know it's important. I also know that as a town, the growth that we've seen in that department over the past 13 years cannot be sustained moving forward. It's the second biggest nut in our budget. And as I stated earlier, it's growing in complete disproportion with everything else in this town. At some point in time, we need to make some hard decisions and say we're going to scale back the number of FTEs in this department to such a level that we can afford to fund it. Otherwise, we're going to be back here a year from now looking to cut something else, or this even deeper. It needs to be rolled back, is my point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Savazio.
Yeah, statistics. In the last 38 years, inflation has been 54% nationally, okay? 1980, this budget was $8,000. So 54%, this budget in general, should be about $17,000. Yeah, 1,000,007, I'm sorry. Yeah, you knew what I was talking about, I didn't, okay? The problem with the costs are that councils, 3 councils, 2 Democrat and 1 Republican, had 0 budgets. You cannot present a 0 budget to make yourself liked and not deal into an attack on how the town runs. And while that was going on, planning board after planning board, zoning board after zoning board, council after council refused sites to have businesses come to this town. So it's not the police department, you can look at them and singularly at them out, but the responsibility of why this town doesn't run properly financially is on the councils. And I think you are the council, you're in charge. When you were in 6 months, I asked you I stood up and said, what have you done to raise revenues? A year and 6 months, what have you done to raise revenues? Okay?
Thank you.
I'd like to add something.
Could we just
Oh, yeah.
have one?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Could you
Hi.
stand, state your name and address, please?
I'm Ginny Bassett. I live at 46 Johnson Road. I'm a business owner and foster. I depend greatly on the foster police. I own a campground. As careful and strict as we are, you deal with the public, you have issues. I can call, and I have someone there, and I depend on that for the safety of our campers. I just can't imagine making the cut in a worse place.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Cheryl. No, I'll follow you.
I just, Mr. Savazio, you have stated statistics, you have stated all these things. You're on the planning board, I've seen squat. So
Give me another vote.
please remember
Give me
that
another vote.
Enough.
pointing.
Give me another vote,
Enough.
Cheryl.
Enough. Thank you. Go ahead, Gordon.
Here's the dilemma on having to cut. Now, the state passed a law several years ago and slowly reduced, it was Pilot Weed, that says no city in town can go above 4% from their previous tax levy. So we sat in and we were well over that. Now, like we said at the beginning of the meeting, we're at 387. So in all intents and purposes, we are at just under the 4% cap. So, as we all know, you have to get it, if we're gonna refund this, it must come from somewhere else. In the position that we are in, you have multiple roadblocks in the way. For example, the schools have what's called maintenance of effort. So when the schools cannot be reduced from the previous year. Can't do it. You also have almost like binding arbitration where if we cut them and they don't like it, we're spending many legal fees fighting battles at RIDE before we can even get to the court. So then the region, the financial town meeting, that's already set. And that was the biggest chunk of the increase in this budget. 28 taxpayers from the town of Forster showed up. 28 taxpayers. So we get dumped on us. We have to get it under the 4% cap. So I asked, do you want to cut the libraries to redo this? Do you want to cut the volunteer fire department's budget to refund this? Do you want to cut the town hall services to refund this? Do you want to cut the DPW, who's also public safety, clearing and paving our roads? We are in an extreme difficult position, especially when we are just under the 4% cap, that we're going to have to take from Peter to add to Paul where we're at right now. So I ask anybody, where do you want us to get this money? We're at 4%. Do you want it to come from the schools? You got a legal battle. You want it coming from the libraries? They got maintenance of effort too. You cut them, they also lose their state aid based on what we go. So they have a maintenance of effort then. So it's either the DPW or your volunteer firefighters or your town hall. You want to shut the town hall down 2 days a week? Because A $92,000 cut in this budget would be almost taking half of her entire town hall and shutting it down. So I ask, where do we go? It's easy to complain, but where do you get the answers? And that's in essence where we are. We're just under the cap, so it has to come from somewhere. That's all I had to say.
Can it be taken from here, some from here, some from there, some from
We
there?
did that last
We
night.
did that last night. We cut DPW, just to get under the cap, we
What
cut
about the libraries
DPW,
and
we cut the
the
town hall, we
libraries?
cut the libraries. We've already took from
What about
everybody.
fire departments and?
We cut.
We cut. So that's the issue. So what do you want to give up? Shut the town hall down half days, cut the volunteer firefighters departments in half, cut the libraries in half, because that's what you're gonna have to do to recoup. Because we can't go over the cap, that's state law.
Okay.
You need to wait, other people who haven't spoken yet. Ms. Butler.
Lisa Johnson Butler, or Butler Johnson, I should say. 41 South Killenly Road. I heard mention of the police increasing the force for purposes of a business or of the school. Are they not responsible for their own security to a certain extent, or should we increase, you know, what if the campground gets bigger? Do we have to hire more police for that reason, or for the school, are they responsible for their own safety officer, or if there comes to having one required
The
there?
business is a business in the town, no matter what size it is. They have a right to protection from the police regardless of how big they are, how small they are. If they need to call a police officer, everyone has a
Well, I
right.
realize that, but
But the
if
school,
it
we
gets
told you
bigger.
last night, they will be responsible for hiring their own resource person. But as far as
Which would
businesses
be in
go,
the
you
King School
can't.
budget,
But
which
that's
would
your money
increase that
still,
budget.
yeah, it's still the town's taxpayer. Yeah.
Right.
So if you have the town's budget, I expect the town to, I understand what she's saying.
Yeah, I know what she's saying, but we still owe it to them to protect them.
Ms. Ryan.
Right, but I mean, if you had, if say you had a bar that continually absorbed every on-duty patrol officer, you know, would you look at that differently? Can you
Maybe
say,
we shut them down.
well, you know,
If they had a
have a
problem
right
like that,
to
just like
have,
the city
you
did.
know,
Right.
but it's, it was
I
just a
knew what you
question.
were saying.
If she increases the size of her business, maybe it should be a little bit on the
But she's
business owner
not,
side
she
to.
can't.
But you wouldn't have to anyway.
No, you wouldn't. I don't believe you would. I think it doesn't matter what size. He's talking about getting big businesses in. We would owe them that not that courtesy, we would owe them that protection as well. If what Mr. Savazio wanted to happen happens, which I'm not saying it shouldn't or I don't want it to, I'm just saying we would still owe them the police protection.
But then we would have revenue.
Right,
So it would hopefully
Offset.
offset.
but we do get revenue from
Hopefully
her
it would
business, we can't.
I'm not disputing
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Mrs. Ryan.
Well, number one, I mean, there are businesses in town where the police are called weekly, and you can't, you know, say, okay, after, 2 calls, this month, I'm sorry, you're on your own, or you're gonna have to pay. I mean, maybe you can. But my other comment was, Kelly said we were at 3.67?
3.87
3.87.
is where,
that's not-
that's half. She said 3 point what?
3.67,
I think the revenues are 3.67, but that's if I, the levy would be. That's if I level fund every revenue.
How much money is that to get to 4%? Just curious.
$68,000.
Once I just want to add one other thing too, to where we got.
So you could add half of this back and still be under the 4%.
Kel, would that be with the changes that haven't gone in yet?
Well, we saw the
Here's
salaries. The
the
thing is,
problem
in
with
this
that.
revenue right now, in this calculation, we've put in the changes in the state aid. Part of the state aid is the revenue reimbursement for motor vehicles because they've done the legislation. So we've saved $54,000, I believe the intent was for it, to benefit the taxpayers. So if,
That would benefit.
well,
Yeah,
not
but
if you
not
still go
next
4%,
year.
including that increase in revenue, that just means you're moving into real estate.
Next year. That's what I'd like to add also to that. We had a 92,000 line item that we would use when pupil transfer affected us adversely. We've never used all of it, we've used portions of it. This year, not only did we understand all the cuts we had to do to get under the 4% cap, but we took $92,000, we're using all of it. That also went into that. Here's the other thing, when the motor vehicle changed, it was a boon back to the town of Forster, $54,000 that should be going back to you. It is going to cut this down under 4%. The problem with that is, you never, ever, ever want to fund operating budgets with surplus money, because you haven't solved the problem. When we sit here next year, we're going to be in twice as much trouble, because you're going to realize we used $150,000 or $140,000 of surplus money to fill holes. That money's gone. We're not getting another 50 from the state. There's no more money in the pupil transfer. So next year, this is a cakewalk to get it under 4%. In comparison, it was hard, but it's a cakewalk to what we're going to deal with next year. And if you add money to this budget, back to whatever that small amount is, it just ramifications down to the next year. It is getting tougher. I've sat there and here for 20 years, and we're running out of railroad tracks. So you're going to have to start cutting volunteer fire department budgets and everything next year. If something ideas aren't taking for what they are and actually implementing them correctly and slowly, or they're going to be forced down your throat in a manner that isn't always good, because it's a knee-jerk reaction. It is coming.
Mr. Savazzi?
Yeah, let me explain something to you. 54% over 38 years is actually 2% per year, time value of money. All right? The problem with it, other things have happened to this town. Fire engines, highway trucks are not increasing at 2%. They're increasing at 4, 5, and 6%. 1980, we could buy a fire truck for $100,000. It's now $400,000. Okay? Do that as an inflation rate, and it's much more than 2%. The other thing that's happened that nobody's looked at, and I've always talked about your fire companies, but that's something else. We've got a lot of fire people here. The other thing that happened here, we have auxiliary people, we have people on the fire departments. The other thing that's happened here is the state gave us back years ago the transference tax. And the transference tax was supposed to alleviate some of the money. Every time a house was sold, I might have the wrong number.
Conveyance fees.
Thank you. All right, see, I say the wrong thing, but I got the idea. We immediately took that money and gave it to the land trust, who continues to take who knows what parcels off the tax rolls. So you're getting hit double. Money that was supposed to alleviate the taxpayers is taking land off the tax rolls. You're getting screwed twice. So that's something you may have to end the land trust. How's that? That'd be exciting, wouldn't it?
Thank you. Is there any other comments on, yes?
So if you could take 2,500 from each library, there's $5,000. 5,000 from each fire
It's only
department.
one library. The library is one. Even though there's two,
All right,
it's one entity.
$5,000. And take $5,000 from the fire companies. I don't know, I would think that they could do with $5,000 less for 1 year. And take the difference of 68,000, that would bring it up to the 4. That would give you close to the 92 grand that you're cutting.
With the libraries, they would also lose additional state aid. So not only would they lose
For
that,
5,000?
yeah, whatever you take them, they get like a 20 or 30% state aid based on their budget. So if you take $5,000, they'll lose an additional 30% of that $5,000 from state aid to get reduced. Same thing as maintenance of that with the schools. And I have never ever seen a cut to a volunteer fire department, and councils have cut many times.
I know that.
And it's always been put back in at the financial town meeting. And again, at this financial town meeting, the ceiling's at 4%.
But isn't it also true that as of now, or it's been the last couple of years or whatever, at the financial meeting, you can stand up and say, I vote to put 60 grand back in.
We can't, because you don't have a cap.
You can to a certain point.
Right.
Right, but
We're
it
there.
doesn't have to go where you want it, where the people want it, is that
It
correct?
doesn't have to be spent.
Right.
No, you can, I think what you're asking is you want to increase.
It's not allocated to a line item within a.
Right, it's
No,
allocated to a department.
Right, so
But you
it'd be from
cannot
wherever.
say what line you want it to go to.
And
It's
same with the
allocated.
cut. And the same with the
And the
cut.
same thing anything with a cut.
Right.
So you can only say,
Right.
I want
And then
X amount of dollars added to
The
the
council can do whatever
library.
they want. They can put it wherever,
No,
correct?
you have to make a motion saying, I want X amount of dollars to go back to the police department. That, the police department, if that passes, then that's fine, that's where that money goes. But then the chief can determine where he spends that money.
So it would have to go to the police department.
It depends, well, it depends on where the motion's
If
made.
it was
You
made
could
for
say
that.
to DPW, I wanna add $5,000 back to the DPW, I wanna add $4,000 back to the library. And then if it
And it
passes,
would go there.
it would have to go there.
So
Let me give you another
for example,
statistic.
on this budget, let's just say for the sake of numbers, we're $50,000 underneath the 4% cap. So in order for a taxpayer to fully fund the $90,000 or $100,000 back into the police budget, you only be able to go up 50, then you would have to start making motions to cut schools. You would have to make motions and pass to cut libraries, make motions to pass to cut volunteers, and then make the motion to add it through. So,
98% of 50, because by charter you have to put 2% of your operating expenses.
and you gotta calculate the 2% transfer in, so we're almost at the cap, so in essence, you're gonna have to get it from somewhere else to put it there.
I just think our police department is just, I can't say more, but it's just as important as our ambulance and our fire
And
departments.
here's where we at, if it's just as important, you have to cut one to add to the other, so that's where the dilemma is, just important to work with this solution.
Could you state your name and address, please, sir?
Rocky Riccio, Bob Silver. Could somebody just tell me what our liability is if for some reason we go over this 4% cap that was made up based on, I have no idea what,
The state.
but now we have the state, it's the state, it's made up, it's a made up rule. What's our liability?
The state won't allow it.
It's a
If we go
law.
to 4-1.
They won't allow it.
4.1.
They just
They
won't
won't
allow
allow, what will they do to us? What would they do to
I
every
won't be
community in
able
the
to,
state?
they won't allow us to assess the levy. They won't approve our certification.
They would probably, the only leverage they would have
So
is
we'll
they
just
would
have a
reduce the
deficit.
state aid that the school gets to make up the difference, so if you want,
No,
if
they
you
won't
want.
allow our certificate.
Alright,
They won't accept our certified tax roll.
It is state law just like speeding and any other law, it is a state law now, 4% private weed, and
They
that's
have
what we
to-
have to work with.
They have to approve our budget, they have to approve our levy.
Yep.
So they won't approve our levy. So therefore, you've approved these expenditures and we won't have the revenue to back it up, we'll have a deficit. That's what you would in essence be doing.
I know, Mr. Sabas, but
Okay,
there
now let me give you another statistic, okay? Someplace between 7 and 10% of all the real estate in this town turns over every year. So Kelly could probably, in general, could figure out how much money goes into, actually, it comes across her. So she could tell you how much money instantly is coming into and going to the land trust. And there's
$2 million worth of land.
$2 million worth of land, there you go.
$2.2 million.
They don't put a land trust, they'll put it in space or farm or something.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it costs you money.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
No cross
Mrs.
talk.
Ryder.
And they're crazy expensive houses that go to conveyance.
If you tried to put 92,000 back in, it would go over cap.
It would go over cap.
But there
yes.
wouldn't be anything preventing someone's for making a motion to put 40,000.
There would not. There would not.
And conversely, for somebody to take 100 out.
Right. So it's, we've all been at the budget, we've all been at the financial town meetings before where we've seen it be increased and there's been motions made. We've also been there where we've heard people decrease departments. So, we all know how it could go. This is what we were looking at it as trying to be financially, it was not easy.
Taken from here to get the poll.
It was not easy to sit here and do this. Believe me, we think that, I don't think there's a single person on this council that doesn't think the police department does well. We also looked at cutting other departments and we cut other departments to see if we could.
And we used $140,000 of surplus to do that. That problem is gonna be sitting in the face of a council sitting here next year.
Schools
And that's
already
huge.
told us, they're gonna be at 3% next year, and we're still gonna have the students swing.
We did not do the cuts to the volunteer fire department.
You want it?
No, I said we did not do any cuts to them.
You want it?
They said we
And
did.
put it to the police?
Well, is he leaving before we get him again? Chief?
Yeah, the next chief, the future of the department, again, they'll still continue to operate. This cut, the career field's not safe, it's not, again, it's just not a safe career field. This cut will degrade public safety, it will degrade officer safety, it'll create more of an environment. The department, when it moves forward, will have to, again, cut services at expense to what, again, just like Easter in the Valley is coming up, like Gordon said the other day, the right pocket pays the left pocket. That officer is being paid at overtime. Will that have to be cut, and the Easter Bunny will be unprotected, or the school, when they request a detail officer, or when the zoning board requests a detail officer, flip a coin if somebody's going to act out, and hope that an officer's close. Multiple incidents at the same time will either be, no response, or you hope for mutual aid. Again, it's going to be an increase on the liability in this town. Again, that's something that the townspeople have to, again, but we're still going to provide services. Again, I've been in law enforcement 23 years serving the town. We do what we have, we do the best as we can. We're going to lose officers, we're going to gain officers. We're going to still continue to do our job. It's on May 2nd, I think it's May 2nd, the community is going to have to come together and determine what they want. I spoke, a couple of years ago, does the school want, school safety, or do they want their iPads or whatever? Again, every agency that comes together, or community or group that comes together, they're going to have to determine what they want.
And unfortunately, speaking of the schools, the state comes in on a lot of what's required of the towns, of the schools, and it's not safety versus iPad, because the state's saying you've got to have an iPad,
Right.
and the state's saying we have to do X, Y, and Z, and the state's saying we can only go with 4%.
Right, and communities talk about mandates, and we have mandates. The town has mandates. Tomorrow, there very well could be a mandate that a school resource officer is, established.
Right.
And again, that's going to be an expense that the town and the school committee are going to have to come up with. So again, it's.
As I said,
Keep
it was
moving on.
not easy there. It was not an easy decision.
Billy?
Yes.
I just have a question. Liability, if there is not enough police protection and something does happen and there are just no police available, is the town liable? I mean,
We call from other, correct me if I'm wrong.
And again, over the course of the years, again, the communities from Connecticut, Gloucester, Situate, Coventry, we've even had Johnson officers, in there. We've had bar fights, we've had accidents, we've had, again, all kinds of incidents where they haven't been able to come. Just recently, we had, all of our officers were tied up. Again, I think it was a domestic, and an alarm came in. Somebody's house, again, an alarm was going off in their house, burglar alarm. State police was requested. We continued with our operations. State police said they were handling it. It took over an hour. Probably 2 years ago, I was the only officer in town, just to provide another example. Responded to a suspicious person on Boss Road, was handling that. A B&E came in on Moosa Valley Road. While responding to that, I get dispatched to a domestic. Prioritized, went to the domestic. State police was going to handle the B&E. It took quite a while for that trooper to make it from Providence to the B&E. And again, if that was an active B&E, luckily it wasn't. Again, the person would have gotten away. But again, we prioritize all the time. The rescues could prioritize. The fire departments prioritize. The DPW prioritize.
We may have a structure fire going, everybody's tied up on that, somebody has a heart attack, we prioritize, and
Right.
rescue from another town comes in and handles it. We
Yeah,
go
yeah,
to
that's-
Situate, we go to Coventry. I mean, there's
Right.
always times where, well, the answer to that is, let's, put 5 stations in town. But there's the cost to everything, so there's always, it's always
It's a
moving
balancing
target.
act.
But we,
Again, and now you know why we cut to 2,000 in the cemetery, but we can't mow cemeteries on the taxpayer's dime and sit here and cut the police chief's position, so.
but I wanna know what
And when we get
the
to-
liability
when we
is.
There is a
when we
liability.
get-
There is,
There is always a liability.
but is the town responsible? That was the question she
Yeah,
asked.
you call 911 and nobody, you call 911 and nobody shows up,
I mean,
there's a
you know,
liability.
I mean, I disagree with the chief on that, because Exeter doesn't have a police force, Exeter's never been sued over that. You do what you have with the officers you have on duty. If both your officers are tied up somewhere and someone else stabs someone, you're not gonna get sued because.
No,
three officers
right, I
on
agree,
duty, you know,
right.
so I disagree with that, I mean, you work with your
Well, that was
parameters.
the question, I
Right.
wanted her to get an answer.
That's my answer. Now, maybe someone else has a different answer, but I think that's the answer. That's what the state police are for, to come in. And,
You would just increase response time.
right, that's right. But, I don't think in, all the years Exeter hasn't had a police force, they've never been sued.
So when we get to public safety with the fire departments, you're gonna realize we had to spend $10,000 because the power pack that operates the jaws of life out of Station 1 has crapped out. So it was, we had to pay for that, because if somebody's trapped in a car, we can't get them out, what do we do, call Situate? So there are things that were coming at us that we had to do. Again, where do you take it from? You know, you take it all, shut the libraries down because it's not a public safety thing, the libraries, it's a convenience thing, and fund the police department? I mean, if you were forced to do that, I'm imagining that would be the decision any common person would say. Unfund the complete libraries and fund the police station, because the libraries are not public safety. Do you want to do that?
No.
No, but I'm just saying, you can't do both.
I mean, I
You've
know,
been
I'm
sitting here
saying
with us,
no.
Cheryl.
I know. I'm the one that put the 10,000 for the jaws of life, I know.
We all
We all did, right, but.
We all didn't cut the police station, but we all did agree on the fact power back.
Yes, we did.
Any other questions right now? Yes, Mr. Sheldon.
I've been listening, I think that the finances of the town, I gotta start all over. You guys have done a wonderful job finessing last year's budget, and I think you've done a wonderful job to come up with these numbers for this year's budget. What I don't hear is the fact that none of this is gonna change next year, except get worse. And then it's gonna get worse the year after. Even if you got a business in town tomorrow that would be paying a fair amount of taxes, you wouldn't be paying it for 5 years, because we have a deal. Somebody comes in town, they get a 5-year tax bill. You're gonna have to fund tax increases for the next 5. You've already had them for the last 5 budgets. We still gotta pay for a police station. You have that many tax increases over that many years. Nobody's gonna wanna come here to open up a business anyway. We have to solve those problems today. Now, Mrs. Hawes looked at Ron Javazio and said, well, you're on a board, do something. We are on a board and we are trying to do something. We still get a lot of opposition from the people who don't want to do anything. Okay, we need to clean up our boards, or nothing's ever going to happen.
We're not here to discuss that tonight, thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, did I miss something?
No.
Okay. Moving on to animal control, which is,
Excuse me.
is there something else? Did I, okay. Animal control is, that's contractual. When Mr. Caparelli, thank you, I want to focus on Caparelli every time. Mr. Caparelli retired, we went to Situate and saved money there, and that's contractual.
Guys,
So now we're going to move on to public safety, others, which is Department 33. And these are EMA, ambulance, fire departments. And you will see there the public safety equipment power unit jaws of life, which South Foster is buying now because we need it now, and come July, we will reimburse them with it for that money. So that's where that money is there, that's $10,000.
Pretty much, they were pretty much level funded from the previous year. The only thing that went up was that. So,
Okay, any questions on that?
I do. Is there a reason we didn't budget it in capital? It was late, it was last night we discussed it, that we didn't move it to capital?
we have a problem with capital and still needs.
We're doing okay with it, and we decreased for emergency services, maybe we could increase it for the 10 and not take it out of the current operations. It is a capital item, it's over $10,000 in it.
Well, we can discuss it at the next meeting, I guess.
Okay, so it's just something to think about.
Okay. Any questions on that department? Moving on to Parks and Recreations.
I received a comment today from Denise, from somebody they wanted to, no, not, oh, not yet, they didn't.
We even cut Parks and Recreations to,
They wanted to, add, I guess there's a tri-state football and cheerleading.
Yes.
And they wanted to know whether they're included in this, Situate participates, and we actually have more Foster students or Foster participants than there are in, I think, Situate and Gloucester combined.
Is that the Titans?
Yes. So they were going to put in a request, he didn't know how much he was gonna request, and I said we would consider it next week.
okay.
So that's the opposite way, but I can't imagine it would be more than 1 or 2,000, but it's something for you to consider. We give money for Little League, basketball, soccer, so, and I guess there's just as many, if not more. Then there are, the other sports, and
Don't the parents pay?
they do, I guess, a little bit. And he said that we used to fund that in 2010, and whoever was running the program, who was affiliated with Foster, stopped requesting, and he wasn't there, and he's not the treasurer, so now they're a different treasurer, and he's more actively involved, and he wanted to know. So, having just a little wire, because it's not adopted yet, so I said I'd mention it.
Okay. Any questions regarding Parks and Recreation? Okay, moving on, long-term, Department 40, this is Providence Water. Not much we can do there.
4 years to go.
Yes.
Yes. It's a nice chunk.
Is that gonna be at the same payment, the 190, or it looks like it's
Well,
going
that's the
up?
other problem. We've got a huge payment at the end, and we discussed in our budget workshops. We've got to stop preparing ourselves for that last payment and stop putting money aside, because the last payment doesn't pay the whole thing off. We'll have a little bit of a balance. We don't budget for that.
That balloon payment, so we're hoping to increase it. This was not the year to do that?
And next year's gonna be another problem, and another problem, and then you're gonna be faced with that at the end of the payment. There's a big chunk at the end. And normally what you would wanna do is put 10,000 a year away for the next 5 to 6 years, so when it comes, it's there. We haven't done that. Again, we're kicking the can down the road.
Well, we did increase it from
We
175.
increased it based on, to try to decrease that lump sum payment, but the problem is the interest rate is going up. So as the interest rate goes up, anything new interest, unfortunately, that 15,000 will most likely go to interest instead.
Right, so
At least half.
the problem is, we were
And the
talking
whole
about
point is to decrease
putting
it.
money aside, but we're kicking the can down the road.
Excuse me.
Yes, Mr. Savati.
On that, in that regard, a historical fact, how many years did we hold off making?
Too many.
How many?
Too many.
Too many, so.
15?
Okay,
I've only
thank
been here 10, so.
you. Okay, so for 15 years,
No.
we'd be.
It was about
Okay.
10.
7.5, who cares?
You can only go back.
For X amount of years, councils didn't make the payment. Somehow, some bizarre reason, Jonathan Lewis thought we were gonna win. All right? No, excuse me, this is history, all right? And we didn't make any payments, and this is why we're stuck in this place. The councils were raising,
But it's water under the bridge.
no, it
I
isn't,
can't-
you need, excuse me,
I didn't mean that
Over
as
the
a pun,
dam,
I'm
not
sorry.
over the bridge.
I
It's water
didn't,
over
go
the dam.
ahead, go ahead, Mr. Savazio.
you need to understand the mistakes that were made so you don't make them again,
I
okay? All right, so those years those councils were raising taxes 4% and making no payments, put this council in the spot you're in.
It wasn't that payments weren't made, they, state requires or allows them to enter into a treaty to, negotiate what they're going to pay, and that treaty was expired by nearly 10 years, even though we tried to put some money aside, yes.
But they did increase the levy on.
But as you increase the levy and you change the valuation of their property, it increased. And we nearly had a settlement, and then it took 3 more years to settle.
And we settled the same settlement that we had
We
had
did.
before.
I'm aware.
Okay, so we're moving on to capital, page 15. Any questions there?
I have a question.
Yes.
Now, at the next meeting, you adopt the budget, correct?
Yes, at April 12th.
Now, Kelly made a suggestion of moving that $10,000 for the Jaws of Life to capital,
Right.
because it is a capital expense.
Yes.
But then I heard, oh, we'll talk about it. Well, when do you talk about it? Is it going to
We
be
are
on the
having-
agenda?
As a result of tonight's meeting, we are having another budget workshop next Thursday night, 6 o'clock. Come on down.
This is the purpose
We'll do it
of,
all over
this is
again.
the purpose of the public hearing, to take the voices of the people and incorporate it into our next meeting. You should know that.
I've been taking notes.
Yeah, no, I was just curious, because if it is a capital expense, what reason could you have for not putting it in capital? And is it legal not to put it in capital?
Well, it's absolutely legal. You can pay for capital out of any
But
budget.
she's saying, is it
Legal
legal not to do that?
You can fund it from operations, absolutely.
But why would you?
Why would you? Because our capital fund has not been the strongest, but if we're rebuilding it, we've made cuts to the capital appropriation this year.
We just cut $100,000 payment for a fire truck out of this capital
So
this year
that's a
alone.
change.
But this is an emergency.
They asked for a fire, the first payment of a fire truck. The council cut that last night.
Yeah, 100,000 out of capital.
So where the original budget was 490, not 390. As of last night, they cut in another 100, so that kind of changes the perspective of what's happening in the capital fund. Now I think they could possibly, it wouldn't decrease the fund balance in our capital fund. We are building it up because we have our rainy day fund, which by ordinance, we're supposed to keep 10% of our operations in fund balance. We're at that level. So anytime we have a surplus, like the pool, we put it into capital. So our capital fund has been replenishing each year.
But
So,
I have seen councils
I agree.
in 2 years expend $1 million out of capital.
So, but right now, we just cut 100,000, it is a capital expense, we're nearing the 4%. And honestly, we've gone up quite a bit each of the previous years. And don't forget, a 4% increase to your taxpayers is actually closer to a 5. I mean, I really can't do it right now because it's a reval year, but with your tax freeze, 24% of the taxpayers will not be affected by your increase.
$500,000 is,
More than that, it's closer to $600,000, so of your property is frozen, it's not the assessed value, but it, yes. So, the thing is, if 24% of your taxpayers are gonna, obviously a 4% increase could be closer to a 5. So we obviously would try to stay below the 4% because.
Any other questions on capital? Page 16, education, formerly Payne School. I will say, for regional, it's a done deal. As Mr. Rogers, 28 people showed up.
28 people.
and that is, how much is the total for the region?
If we use the 93,000
$5
set
million
aside,
almost?
split it.
5 million?
4.8.
With with a 350.
Oh, okay, I thought you meant, yeah, I thought you meant an increase.
No, no, no.
Oh, we're not ever gonna.
We wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah.
Mrs. Ryder.
But seriously, only 28 people went. How many Gloucester people went?
78.
No, total. It was like 30
The
to
total
40.
was,
So,
Of the 28
78.
of Forster, that was also counting the board of canvassers and
10 school committee members,
Right.
board of canvassers, and council members.
was 10 of that.
So you had
28. So
18.
18 people as taxpayers showed up that didn't have, that went on their own free will.
Right, but we still never have a choice.
Because 18
We
people
don't.
showed up.
I mean, because we're regionalized, we have no choice. The Foster will
Of course you have a
always,
choice, you can go vote.
the
It doesn't make a
Foster will
difference.
always
40 years
be
still.
the lesser represented.
Yeah, right.
That's it.
There was meetings for Foster.
They didn't have to do that.
no, we could have
You
had
could have had
more.
100 people there.
It would have been, you could have done whatever you wanted.
Okay,
We-
yes.
I mean, I've been on that committee when we were cut about 5%, and that was a joint decision by the two towns. I think that it just seems to me that people in Foster just mentally have sort of given up that they have any control there, but if you had had 60 more people come, which easily could have
Right.
happened, it could have affected
Hold on.
change. So I really think that's a perception that isn't true, and as a committee member, I also don't feel like we vote based on where we live. Truthfully, this is like kids who are just in our schools. They happen to live in Foster or Gloucester, but I do think if people, I mean, really, that was such a small group the other night that a small number of people could have changed the outcome entirely if they had come.
Well, for example, we have more taxpayers in this room tonight from Forster, literally,
Yeah.
than we did at the regional financial town
To
meeting.
vote for a $5 million budget.
Correct. So,
Doesn't make
and here we are cutting a $92,000, no offense, but $92,000 cut on the police budget? Good do. Did you hear something? No. $92,000 to our police budget.
Yeah, you reverse that.
Yeah, well, what I'm trying to say is $92,000 cut out of a almost $5 million budget is nothing.
Well, the thing is, we've been saying all along, since the very first day I presented this budget, which you were here, I said this budget was ugly, and that we weren't going to be able to do very much, because the school went up $352 or $3,000.
And that's the regional.
The regional school went up $352,000. We used part of our student population surplus last year, which means that is a sort of kick the can, I hate to keep using that expression. So we had to fund that $93,000 this year or use it again. So basically, if we don't use that set aside funds, the current effect of that increase would be $440,000, say. The police went up $100,000, I'm overestimating, it's 92. And then DPW went up 60 based on their needs. You were already $100,000 over the cap before you even sat down. So there's 3 departments, I mean, we sat here for 3 hours and cut $3,000 or $4,000 that first day. And we went through every other department other than police, DPW, and the school. So when you say it from the first meeting, you have 2 other budget meetings after that. She sent out a notice with a higher number, not even the lower number, which is what really you did increase, and you still can't get 28 people there. I don't know what else to do.
18 now, because the other 10 had it there.
So we've been saying it all along, so the 352, it stays, we're using the 93, that 93 is gone.
So
So
I think
now
your
next
battle,
year-
a cut, like I said, if they would cut, the region would cut 92,000.
You technically have to cut it quite a bit more than that, because that 93 don't
Well,
make the
yeah,
Foster
portion.
contribution.
Right.
So it'd be like
We're a third.
270,000.
Right.
But still, out of a $5 million budget, you know,
Yeah.
with the police budget, we're not bringing them any less than they had last year.
Just clarify.
No, and it's really
Right,
just
you're
the
right.
principle of it.
What Mr. Mara was saying is that
It's a third.
we're only a portion of that, so it would have to be a greater decrease in order to reach what would be the 92 for us.
And my point isn't to go to cut, my point is go and vote. Go and have a say, because don't come to our financial town meeting.
Beat
I
us.
think you can affect all this change, because
It was
it's
done.
75% done.
At that meeting, it was done, it was sealed at that
And
meeting.
I've been saying it time and time and time again, and now it's too late, I don't know what to say. So we're gonna look at this budget, we're gonna have all these conversations, but really, it could go up 452, we're funding the 93. So you're not gonna have that 93 to put towards it next year. So if everything stays the same, they don't increase, you owe them $100,000 just to stay the same. So we've decreased it as much as we can, so we're at the 353. And so you're already you're 3/4 of your way to your cap, there's not much we can do about it.
Yeah.
So getting rid of the tax freeze didn't help?
It's going to take years,
Not
Todd.
yet.
It'll take years.
Everybody was grandfathered in.
Unfortunately, they have to pass away to take.
Well.
Totally.
Interject facts to this conversation, but the reality is, the average duration any citizen in the town of Foster spends on the tax freeze is 9 years. That's the average amount of time. It's 37.
And we
The lady that
also.
just died was on there 37 years, so you can imagine what she was paying for taxes.
Smithfield is facing this problem right now.
Yeah.
Everybody else was.
And we did institute another credit, so that's going to replace, and that credit's pretty much where the average taxpayer received anyway.
And I will say, I've gotten several phone calls because I was the one on the council that did not agree with getting rid of the tax freeze. But I've gotten several phone calls from citizens that are on the tax freeze that are concerned about the increase in our taxes, because when they do go to sell their house, they're not going to be able to because of the increase in taxes. So people say, oh, they come and vote for it. I'm not so sure that they do come and vote for it, because they are concerned that when their family goes to sell, and we know that that happens, where people find out, oh wait, my taxes aren't that, it's something else, so selling the house is difficult. Going to Payne School, there has been no change. And as it's been pointed out, there is a maintenance of effort, there's no change in population. And they helped us out greatly last year.
We worked
Moving
together.
on.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Any other questions? We have the expenditures page. Anything else that anybody would like to bring out at this time? Otherwise, I'll call the public hearing to a close. I'll call the public hearing to a close. Thank you. Moving on to new business, we have Mike. What do you say? I have the wrong public, okay. Oh, yeah, thank you. I have two.
Yeah, that's what happened. We didn't have a packet.
Okay, so, old business, the financial statement, and standards, policies, and procedures of non-town entities receiving appropriation. This has been on. What this is the volunteer fire departments and ambulance telling us what monies they've had for our budget, and now.
It was money and it was also the agreed upon internal controls.
Right.
So because of the audit, the auditors requested us to see all the funds from the fire department.
Well, it was more than that, it was accountability.
Yeah, it's not even really,
Yeah.
you could just say it's just good internal controls, that if you're gonna give close to $500,000 to outside agencies, that you make sure that they follow basic internal controls and that they provide you with certain reporting document, they follow reporting. We came up with a standardized controls and reports, and they didn't agree to it, they were going to get back to us.
Well, not all departments.
Right.
Two departments, the libraries didn't have a problem, Worcester didn't have a problem, Boston Center didn't have a
Right.
problem, and the two libraries didn't have a problem.
Although the libraries just
So
go with
South
everything.
Gloucester and the ambulance go.
Are we any closer than the last time?
I don't know, we met,
Did you?
I haven't heard anything.
we haven't heard anything. They were gonna get back to us and we still haven't.
No, I think Gordy's still working on it. He's,
So you're gonna get to a point where you have to make a decision about what you wanna do one way or another.
You can get that.
is he
Yeah,
talking
but you ready to get that information?
I was able to, I actually went online and researched 990s and I got their
Got
990s.
the information that they don't wanna give you.
I did,
It's public information.
I did, I went a different way about it, but I got it. It's a year in arrears because, depending on what their fiscal year is, most of them are calendar year, so, the information I got was for December of 2016. So it's 15 months in arrears. But the, ambulance corps was their fiscal, so their July to June is their fiscal year. So I have up to June 30th, 2017. The 990 is pretty detailed, more than actually we asked them for, so.
Right.
I don't know why the hesitation to just provide
their
it.
concern is the council not funding them because they have their own money.
They raise a lot, they raise money, they work hard to raise money for fundraisers and to use at their discretion. And they're afraid a council's going to come in and say, well, we're gonna cut you $2,000 less because you raised $10,000. It's never happened since I've been here, but I've worked with no offense.
I tried to cut
Council's not gonna see.
5% out of their budgets last year, and
Didn't work out.
it came to that angry mob.
Okay, so there's nothing further to do with that.
Nothing.
So, moving on to new business, we have the posting of the police chief's position. At our last meeting, we did approve a committee consisting of 2 council members, Ms. Laws and myself, the chief, and another chief from another department at Chief Zeal's discretion, along with Kelly. We're looking at posting the chief's position. So I know the chief gave us tonight.
I think we have the ability to look within the department first before we go out, so I would make a recommendation that the chief see if anybody's interested within the department in the position and stop there.
Do you think something should come from the council itself saying that we?
Well, I mean, I don't wanna go out and spend advertisement.
No, I'm just saying, do you think that the council should formulate something and say?
Well, we need to get from point A to point B, so this is my point A. I'm not gonna make a motion if you don't want me to, but I just think, my opinion is we should
I'm
look
just asking
within
a
before we
question.
look without. So that's just my opinion. If
I
you wanna
agree.
go along with that or make a
No.
motion, it's up to you.
No, I'm just
Yeah.
asking, do you think it's appropriate to ask from the chief? So, chief.
There's already interest from within.
Okay.
Whatever.
And, again, it's been done, Sergeant Gowell, myself, it's already been done previous, so there's, precedent set.
I think the courtesy is to find them, see if they are qualified, move forward
Well,
with
and
that
that's
first.
what, again, that's what I presented tonight, because I wasn't sure what the discussion or action was gonna be. The council just needs to decide. Again, the previous 2 were within, again, just a suggestion, we're supervisors of, within the department, or, in this case,
So for the sake of argument, I will make a motion that we instruct the chief to find out if anybody within his department is interested in it, and then the committee.
And qualified.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get to. And if they're qualified, the committee will vet it if the personnel that are requesting are actually qualified for the position, and then come back with a recommendation to the council, if that the case has.
The chief's trying to finish, wait, he's trying to finish.
Well, go ahead and finish now.
We're gonna get a motion on the floor.
I seconded it. We can
So
have
now we'll
discussion.
have discussion.
So we'll be expecting names?
no, and again, just
No, they'll apply.
as a suggestion,
All
do you want to set, what I put in front of you, previous supervisory experience, or,
Yeah, the letter you have in front of us, a certified police officer from the Rhode Island Municipal Police Academy, police supervisory experience, ability to perform emergency duties at all time, and to be recalled to the town force during emergency services when needed, ability to perform multiple projects simultaneously with different levels of priority, ability to relate to members of the town council, department heads, and other official staff public in a courteous manner, ability to understand current laws and use common legal terms, strong oral, written, and personnel communication skills, have the ability to prepare, monitor, maintain the annual budget of the police department, have considerable knowledge of federal, state, and local laws, have the ability to be fair and apply the laws in a fair manner, and thorough knowledge of the ability to interpret laws, rules, and regulations. I think those are all very good points to be done, and I would agree with that.
So would I.
So would I.
Supervisor. Yes, Chris seconded.
Yep.
Did you have any further discussion?
Mike?
Mr. Dillon, you were,
No,
oh, okay, but you had something you wanted to say. Mrs. Ryder.
I thought the question was whether or not you were gonna vote to post it. Now, time is wasting because, you know, he doesn't have a lot of time that he's going to be here.
We are
Wouldn't
looking
it-
internally.
Right, but what if that falls through? Couldn't you just vote to, on posting it, you know, at a certain date and then just not do it if you don't have to?
We also have the ability to appoint someone as interim, so
Correct.
we could go that route. Any further questions?
And then, so, I will post that. The only question is previous supervisory experience, you know, again, the two officers that, you know, have shown interest, the one, well, again, I'm not gonna mention it, but, so I think that describes it, I can post that.
I think that would be appropriate.
And then, can we set a interview date?
I think with you being, just my opinion, already contacting the chief, you have the ability to talk to the council president, the police liaison, and them too, and set it up amongst yourselves and take it from there. I don't think we need to bog it down any more than that. I think that the simple motion allows that to happen, so.
That works for me.
And Kelly's also on that committee.
Okay. Motion's been moved, it's been seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
That's the first motion for the tonight, ain't it? 10:09, we made one motion.
So next on our agenda is a letter to support Senate 2089 relating to state affairs and government open meetings. I was approached by the volunteer fire departments because this is who it affects. The state, once again, has said that all committees, et cetera, have to submit minutes to the town clerk, which need to be posted in a certain amount of time. Our volunteer fire departments have a lot on their plate, and to formulate minutes and get them in on a timely fashion is somewhat limiting.
I would like to make a motion to table this, as this is the first time I'm actually seeing the actual document. So I haven't even had a chance to look into this, and with these resolutions, I can look into them and I actually make phone calls. So this was just popped in front of me at the beginning of the meeting. I haven't even read it.
Oh, how about?
So I would like to make a motion to table this.
Okay.
Second.
It is right now out to be studied, but I would like it to be on the next agenda.
That's fine, I just moved it.
Because I think it would benefit our clerk and
My thing is, I would have, if it actually moved tonight, I would vote to not support it
right.
on the fact.
I understand what you're saying, but
I'm
I'm just voicing my
Yes.
concern. Okay. And you should have a copy of the letter that I formulated. Okay. Hearing that, future agenda items, we have, oh, I'm sorry, you did motion it, and I didn't. Go ahead. You made the motion, is there a second?
I second it. I already seconded it.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Moving on, before we go to executive session, future agenda items, we have Wright's Auto Parts for May 24th, and the police site survey bid for April 12th. Is there anything else? We have that letter, which will be April 12th.
No, still not.
That's why it was on, I think you said you wanted an hour per week until it was resolved. That's why it was on, I couldn't figure it out.
Right, that's why it was on.
Yeah. Big now.
Anything else? No? That being said, we'll go into executive session.
I need the clerk to give me the thing.
Thank you.
It's been many times as I've read it, I still don't have it memorized. I move to go into executive closed session pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 42-42-4 for using stated Rhode Island General Laws 42-46-5. We have A1 personnel and A2 potential litigation and those two.
Do I have a second? Second. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.